The creation of the world. Chapter 1. In the beginning. A long time ago, before the world existed, there was only darkness. No light, no land, no sky, just emptiness. But then, something incredible happened. God spoke. "Let there be light," he said. And suddenly, light appeared, bright and shining. The darkness was no longer alone. God separated the light from the darkness. He called the light day, and the darkness night. It was the first day. The next day, God created the sky, wide and endless, stretching above the waters. The sky was beautiful and blue. This was the second day. On the third day, God gathered the waters into seas and made dry land appear. He called the dry land earth, and the waters seas. Then he made plants of every kind, tall trees, colorful flowers, and green grass. The earth was full of life. On the fourth day, God created the sun to shine during the day and the moon and stars to glow at night. The sun was warm and bright, and the moon shone softly in the dark sky. The fifth day was special. God filled the sky with birds, eagles, doves, and sparrows. He filled the seas with fish, big and small, swimming through the deep waters. Everything was alive and moving. Then came the sixth day. God created animals to walk on the earth: lions, elephants, horses, and tiny ants. But his greatest creation was still to come. He made humans, a man and a woman, in his own image. He gave them life and blessed them, telling them to care for the world. Finally, on the seventh day, God rested. He saw everything he had made, and it was very good. The world was full of beauty and life. This was the beginning of everything. The Garden of Eden. Chapter 2. A beautiful garden. After creating the world, God made a special place. It was called the Garden of Eden. This garden was beautiful and full of life. The trees were tall and strong. Their leaves were green and fresh. There were flowers of every color, filling the air with a sweet smell. Rivers flowed gently, making the land rich and healthy. The sun shone warmly, and the birds sang happily in the trees. In the middle of the garden, God placed two special trees. One was the tree of life. The other was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Then God made the first man. His name was Adam. God took dust from the ground, shaped it, and breathed life into him. Adam opened his eyes and saw the beautiful world around him. God gave him the garden to live in and take care of. Adam named the animals: lions, elephants, birds, and even tiny insects. But there was no one like him. He was alone. God saw this and said, "It is not good for man to be alone. I will make a helper for him." So while Adam was sleeping, God took one of his ribs and made a woman. Her name was Eve. When Adam saw her, he was happy. Now he was not alone. God blessed them and said, "Be fruitful and increase in number. Take care of the earth and everything in it. Adam and Eve lived in the Garden of Eden, where everything was perfect. They walked with God, and they had everything they needed. But in the garden there was also a test, a choice. Would they listen to God, or would they choose their own way? The temptation and the fall. Chapter 3. The test in the garden. Adam and Eve lived happily in the Garden of Eden. They had everything they needed. The fruit was sweet, the air was fresh, and they walked with God every day. But God had given them one rule. You may eat from any tree in the garden, he said, but do not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. If you eat from it, you will surely die. Adam and Eve listened. They enjoyed the garden and stayed away from the forbidden tree. But one day, a serpent appeared. It was more clever than any other animal. The serpent spoke to Eve. Did God really say you cannot eat from any tree? It asked. Eve shook her head. No, we can eat from any tree, except this one. If we eat from it, we will die. The serpent smiled. You will not die, it whispered. God knows that if you eat this fruit, your eyes will be opened. You will be like God. You will know good and evil. Eve looked at the fruit. It was beautiful and looked delicious. She wanted to be wise. She reached out, took the fruit, and ate it. Then she gave some to Adam, and he ate too. At that moment, everything changed. Their eyes were opened. They realized they were naked, and they felt ashamed. They quickly took fig leaves and covered themselves. Later, they heard God walking in the garden. But instead of running to him, they hid among the trees. Adam, where are you? God called. Adam stepped forward. I was afraid, so I hid. Did you eat from the tree I told you not to eat from? God asked. Adam pointed to Eve. She gave me the fruit, and I ate it. Eve pointed to the serpent. The serpent tricked me, and I ate. God was sad. Adam and Eve had disobeyed. Because of their choice, they could no longer stay in the garden. Life would now be difficult. There would be pain and suffering. But God still loved them. Before sending them out, he made clothes for them from animal skins. Then, Adam and Eve left the Garden of Eden and entered a new, unknown world. It was the first time they were truly alone. But even then, God had a plan to bring them back. Life outside the garden. Chapter 4. A new world. Adam and Eve stepped outside the Garden of Eden for the first time. The world was different. It was not like the beautiful garden they had left behind. The ground was rough, and the sun felt hotter. The trees did not grow as easily, and the rivers were not as peaceful. Life was now difficult. Adam worked hard to grow food. He dug the earth, planted seeds, and waited for them to grow. But weeds and thorns grew too, making his work painful. Eve also had challenges. When she gave birth to their first child, it was painful, but she was happy. She named him Cain. Later, she had another son, Abel. Their family was growing. As the boys grew, they became very different. Cain worked in the fields, growing crops. Abel took care of sheep. One day, Cain and Abel brought gifts to God. Abel gave his best sheep, while Cain brought some of his crops. God was pleased with Abel's offering, but not with Cain's. Cain was angry. His heart was full of jealousy. God spoke to Cain, "Why are you angry? If you do what is right, you will be accepted. But be careful, sin is waiting at your door. It wants to control you, but you must rule over it." Cain did not listen. One day, while they were in the field, Cain attacked Abel and killed him. God spoke to Cain, "Where is your brother?" Cain looked down. "I don't know," he said. "Am I my brother's keeper?" God's voice was sad. "What have you done? Your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground." Cain had to leave his family. He went far away and started a new life. But his heart was full of pain and regret. Adam and Eve were heartbroken. They had lost both of their sons. One was gone, and the other was dead. But God gave them another child. His name was Seth. Through him, God's promise would continue. Even though life was hard, God never left them. He had a plan for the future. The Great Flood. Chapter 5. The world becomes evil. Many years passed, and the world was filled with more and more people. But as the world grew, so did wickedness. People became selfish, violent, and unkind. They stopped listening to God. God saw the earth and was saddened. People had turned away from him. They hurt each other and did what was wrong. Only one man still walked with God. His name was Noah. Noah was righteous. He obeyed God and lived a good life. God looked at Noah and made a plan to save him and his family. Noah, God said, "I am going to send a great flood to cover the earth. But you must build an ark, a great boat. Bring your family and 2 of every kind of animal inside. You will be safe." Noah listened. He did everything just as God commanded. He gathered wood and built the ark. It was huge, big enough to hold his family and all the animals. People laughed at Noah. "Why are you building a boat? There is no flood," they mocked. But Noah kept working. He trusted God. Finally, the ark was ready. Noah led the animals inside: lions, elephants, birds, and even tiny insects. His family entered too. Then the sky grew dark. Raindrops began to fall. At first, they were small, but soon the rain became heavy. The earth shook as water burst from the ground. The great flood had begun. For 40 days and 40 nights, rain covered the earth. The waters rose higher and higher, covering even the tallest mountains. Everything outside the ark was lost. But inside, Noah and his family were safe. Then one day, the rain stopped. The waters slowly began to go down. After a long time, the ark came to rest on a mountain. Noah sent out a dove to see if the land was dry. The first time, it came back. The second time, it returned with an olive leaf. The third time, it did not come back at all. The earth was dry again. Noah and his family stepped out of the ark. The world was fresh and new. Noah built an altar and thanked God. God placed a rainbow in the sky. "This is my promise," he said. "Never again will I destroy the earth with a flood." The rainbow was a sign of God's love and faithfulness. Life on earth would begin again. A new beginning. Chapter 6. A fresh start. The flood was over. The world was quiet again. The sun shone brightly in the sky, and the land was fresh and clean. It was time for a new beginning. Noah and his family stepped out of the ark. They looked around at the empty land. Everything had been washed away, but God had given them a second chance. Noah built an altar and gave thanks to God. He offered a sacrifice, and God was pleased. God spoke to Noah and his family. "Be fruitful and increase in number. Fill the earth and take care of it." Then God made a promise. He placed a beautiful rainbow in the sky. "This is my sign," he said. "I will never again destroy the earth with a flood." The rainbow was a reminder of God's love and faithfulness. Noah's sons Shem, Ham, and Japheth began to build their families. Soon, many people spread across the land. They planted crops, raised animals, and built homes. But as time passed, some people forgot about God. They wanted to make a name for themselves. They had an idea. "Let's build a great tower," they said. "A tower so tall that it reaches the sky. Then we will be powerful, and we will not be scattered across the earth." This was not what God wanted. He had told them to fill the earth, not to stay in one place and build a tower for their own glory. God saw what they were doing. If they all spoke the same language, they could do anything. So he decided to stop them. One day, as the people were building the Tower of Babel, something strange happened. Suddenly, they could not understand each other. One worker spoke, but another could not understand him. Confusion spread everywhere. People argued, and the work stopped. Because they could no longer communicate, they separated and moved to different parts of the world. The Great Tower was never finished. This was how different languages began, and how people spread across the earth. God's plan was fulfilled, even when humans tried to do things their own way. Even though people made mistakes, God's love remained. He was still in control, and his plan for the world would continue. The Call of Abraham. Chapter 7. A New Journey. Many years passed after the Tower of Babel. People spread across the earth, forming different nations. But many forgot about God. Then God chose a man. His name was Abram, later called Abraham. He lived in a city called Ur with his wife Sarai and his family. One day, God spoke to Abram. Abram, leave your country, your people, and your father's house. Go to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great. Through you, all the families of the earth will be blessed. Abram listened. He trusted God. Even though he did not know where he was going, he packed his things and left. He took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, and all their servants and animals. They traveled far, trusting in God's promise. When they arrived in Canaan, God spoke again. This is the land I will give to your children. Abram built an altar and worshipped God. He thanked him for his promise. But there was a problem. Abram and Sarai were old, and they had no children. How could Abram's children become a great nation? One night, God took Abram outside. Look up at the sky, he said. Can you count the stars? Your children will be as many as the stars in the sky. Abram believed God's promise. Even though it seemed impossible, he had faith. God gave him a new name, Abraham, meaning father of many nations. And God made a covenant, a holy promise. I will be your God, and you will be my people. Even though Abraham did not see the full promise in his lifetime, he trusted God's plan. This was the beginning of something great, God's promise to Abraham. Chapter 8. The Promise Fulfilled. Abraham and Sarah had waited a long time. God had promised them a child, but many years passed, and they were still childless. They were now very old. One day, God spoke to Abraham again. Next year, Sarah will have a son. Sarah heard this and laughed. How can I have a child when I am so old? She thought. But God's promises never fail. The next year, Sarah gave birth to a baby boy. They named him Isaac, which means laughter, because Sarah had laughed when she heard God's promise. Abraham and Sarah were filled with joy. Isaac was the child God had promised. Through him, God would bless many nations. But then, God tested Abraham. One day, God said, Abraham, take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love. Go to the mountain and offer him as a sacrifice. Abraham's heart was heavy, but he trusted God. He took Isaac and traveled to the mountain. Isaac carried the wood for the offering. Father, Isaac asked, where is the lamb for the sacrifice? Abraham answered, God will provide. When they reached the top, Abraham prepared the altar. Just as he was about to sacrifice Isaac, an angel called out, Abraham, stop, do not harm the boy. Now I know that you trust God completely. Abraham looked up and saw a ram caught in the bushes. God had provided a sacrifice. God blessed Abraham again. Because you have obeyed me, I will make your descendants as many as the stars in the sky. Through your family, all nations will be blessed. Isaac lived, and God's promise continued. Abraham had trusted God, and God had kept his word. Isaac and Rebekah. Chapter 9. A wife for Isaac. Isaac grew up to be a strong and kind man. Abraham, his father, was now very old. He wanted to find a good wife for Isaac, someone who loved God. One day, Abraham called his most trusted servant and said, "Go to my homeland. Find a wife for my son Isaac. Do not choose from the people here, but from my own family." The servant obeyed. He took 10 camels and traveled a long way to a city called Nahor. When he arrived, he stopped by a well outside the city. He prayed, "Lord, please show me the right woman for Isaac. If she gives me water and also gives water to my camels, I will know she is the one." Before he finished praying, a young woman named Rebekah came to the well. She carried a jar on her shoulder. The servant ran to her and asked, "Please, may I have some water?" Rebekah smiled and gave him a drink. Then she said, "I will also give water to your camels." The servant was amazed. This was a sign from God. He gave Rebekah gifts, gold, jewelry, and bracelets. Then he asked about her family. When he learned that she was from Abraham's relatives, he knew God had answered his prayer. Rebekah ran home to tell her family. Her brother, Laban, welcomed the servant. After hearing everything, her family agreed that Rebekah could marry Isaac. The next day, Rebekah left her home. She traveled with the servant to meet Isaac. When she saw him from a distance, she covered her face with a veil. Isaac welcomed her, and they were married. He loved her very much, and together, they began their life as husband and wife. God had led them to each other. This was just the beginning of a new family that God had promised to bless. Jacob and Esau. Chapter 10. 2 brothers, 2 paths. Isaac and Rebekah were blessed with twin sons, Jacob and Esau. Even before they were born, they struggled inside Rebekah's womb. She asked God why this was happening. God answered, "2 nations are in your womb. The older will serve the younger." Esau was born first. He was strong and covered with red hair. Jacob was born right after him, holding Esau's heel. As they grew, they became very different. Esau loved to hunt and spend time outdoors. Jacob preferred staying at home, thinking and learning. One day, Esau came home from hunting. He was very hungry. Jacob had made a pot of stew. Esau said, "Give me some of that stew, I'm starving." Jacob looked at him and said, "First, sell me your birthright." A birthright was very important. It meant receiving the family's greatest blessings. But Esau was so hungry, he didn't care. "What good is my birthright if I die of hunger?" Esau said. He made a deal and ate the stew. Years later, Isaac became old and blind. He wanted to bless his firstborn, Esau. But Rebekah remembered God's words. The younger would be blessed. She told Jacob, "Go to your father. Pretend to be Esau and take the blessing." Jacob hesitated. "What if my father finds out?" Rebekah helped Jacob cover his arms with goat skin, so he would feel hairy like Esau. Then Jacob went to Isaac. "Father, it's me, Esau," he said. Isaac touched Jacob's arms. "You sound like Jacob, but you feel like Esau." Then Isaac gave Jacob the blessing meant for Esau. When Esau found out, he was furious. Jacob was afraid. Rebekah told him, "Run away to my brother's house. Stay there until Esau's anger is gone." Jacob left home, beginning a journey that would change his life forever. God had a plan for him.